I'm not a summer person. Yeah,
I love summer. As long as it's not in the 90s too much. If
that's
it's
what I'm saying. Most of
yeah.
the time, it's humid. That's the humidity is what bothers me more than the heat.
Uh, hmm,
Yesterday was a tough day.
yeah.
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 But that's part of life. I mean, in general, I'm doing fine.
That's good. You look
Yeah.
great. I missed everyone on Saturday because I was at my uncle's thing that Gary mentioned. That it was a great thing for us to get together as a family because we haven't done it since COVID. We haven't seen each other. And,
That's wonderful. That's
yeah,
very
it
important,
was, it
right?
was really good.
Looks like
Doc-
Dr. Ed's having trouble connecting.
yeah,
Is
he's
it?
starting to connect.
Maybe he's only on the phone this time or something. It
Yeah,
says
it looks.
connecting to audio. So,
Hmm. Do you want to start it up, Ruthie? And this
well,
is
I thought I'd wait for Ed, but okay, if he's having
yeah,
trouble,
no.
okay.
Let's see if it. Let's
All
see.
right, I'll start. Samuel said to the people, "Let us all go up to Gilgal and there renew the kingship." So all the people went to Gilgal, and there at Gilgal, before the Eternal, they crowned Saul king. Then they offered up offerings of well being to the Eternal One, and along with Saul, they all held a great celebration. Then Samuel said to all Israel, "I have listened to your pleas and done everything you asked of me, and set a king over you. From now on, the king will be your leader. As for me, I am old and gray. My grown up sons are among you, and I've been your leader since my youth. Here I am. Testify against me in the presence of the Eternal and in the presence of God's anointed king. Have I taken anyone's ox or anyone's donkey? Have I maltreated or oppressed anyone? Have I taken a bribe to turn a blind eye to anyone? Tell me, and I will return it." They answered, "You have not maltreated or oppressed us. You have taken nothing from anyone." He said to them, "Then the Eternal is witness, and God's anointed king is witness this day that you have found nothing sticking to my hand." They answered, "Witness." And Samuel said to the people, "The Eternal is witness, the one who chose Moses and Aaron and who brought your ancestors out of Egypt. Now stand here, and in the presence of the Eternal, I will put the case to you concerning all the victorious acts that the Eternal has done for you and your ancestors. When Jacob and his family came to Egypt, the Egyptians oppressed them, and your ancestors cried out for help to the Eternal, who sent Moses and Aaron, who brought them out of Egypt and settled them in this place. But they forgot the Eternal, their God, who then gave them into the hand of Sisera, Hazor's commanding general, into the hand of the Philistines, and into the hand of the king of Moab, and they had to fight them. They cried out to Eternal, saying, "We did wrong by turning away from the Eternal and serving the Baals and the Astartes. Save us now from our enemies, and we will serve you." Then the Eternal sent Jerubbaal and Bedan and Jephthah and Samuel and saved you from the enemies around you, and you lived in safety. But when you saw Nahash, king of the Ammonites, marching against you, you said to me, "No, we must have a king to rule us, though the Eternal your God is your true king." Now then, there is the king you chose, whom you requested. Now the Eternal has given you a king. If you revere, serve, and listen to God, and do not rebel against the word of the Eternal, then you and your king will be followers of the Eternal, your God, and all will be well. I just want to stop for a minute. Do you notice that the whole time they ever talk about God, they say the Eternal, but in that one sentence, they say, "If you revere, serve, and listen to God, and do not rebel against the word of the Eternal." Now, I find that's interesting because all in this whole Haftarah, they keep on talking about and referring to God as eternal, except for that one line.
Hmm.
I just thought that was interesting. But
And
if
what
you
does
do
the
not,
what does the Hebrew say, Gary? I'm just looking at 14 over here because
yeah,
I see
You know,
Yud
14.
Ke Vav Ke
Oh, it
here.
says Et Adonai v'Avadetem. Let's see. You listen to God and do not rebel. Wait a second.
and the rest of
If
the
you revere,
places, it
serve,
just
and
says
listen to
the
God, do not
eternal.
rebel against him. Yeah, in
But
the
on
Hebrew
the
where it says,
previous,
Im tiru et Adonai va'avadatem oto ushmatem bekolo velo tamru et pi Adonai vayitem gam atem vegam hamelech.
The king.
well,
Yeah.
but what's
Yeah.
interesting in the paragraph before that is they refer to the eternal in the same Hebrew word. Before 13, in 11 to 13, what does it say?
Yeah. The eternal, but when you saw
What's the word for God there?
I don't know.
Oh, it's Adonai again. Okay, so that's interesting because the English then didn't interpret the Hebrew correctly. Okay,
It
then
never
that makes
does.
sense. Okay, now
It's
I understand.
never exact.
Okay, I understand that. Okay, but if you do not listen to the voice of the Eternal, but rebel against the word of the Eternal, then the hand of the Eternal will be against you and against your kings.
We could stop here for 1 second too. Like, I just want to point out, right here, Samuel said, Samuel gives a real quick rundown of the history and things of Israel,
Yeah.
and then he says, "And you lived in safety." And I don't know how long that safety was, but there were periods where things were really good, And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times when we read the Bible, we think it's just all murder and mayhem and people are attacking each other.
There's definitely blocks of time that they refer to, but they don't mention in detail about it.
Right.
That's how I know
Monique.
it. Yeah.
Right. Hey, Monique.
Hi,
Hello.
Monique.
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Yeah. And
Okay. So, do we have more of the Havdalah now?
yeah, let me see. Yep.
Okay. So now stand here and see the great thing that the Eternal is going to do before your very eyes. This is the time of the wheat harvest, is it not? I am going to call to the Eternal, who will send thunder and rain. This will show you what a wrong you have done in the eyes of the Eternal by asking for a king. So Samuel called to the Eternal, who sent thunder and rain that very day. Then the people were greatly in fear of the Eternal and of Samuel. The people all said to Samuel, "Pray for us, so the Eternal your God, so that we do not die, for we have added to all our other sins a new evil by asking for a king." But Samuel said to the people, "Do not be afraid. It is true that you have done all this evil. Just do not turn away from the Eternal, but serve the Eternal with all your heart. Do not turn to know things that cannot help or save you, because they are nothing. The Eternal will never give you up. For the sake of God's great name, for the Eternal has willed it to make you God's own people."
Oh, that was it.
Very nice. That was very reassuring to me. I don't know, I like that last paragraph. It was
ties in with Korach, right?
Yeah, it's just kind of like really makes me feel like, look at you, just do what you're supposed to do, what God asked of you, and everything will be okay. That's how I look at it,
Right. And and that I agree. I think that's a really good way to look at it. And then the other thing too is that I forget where it was, the passage in Torah where it says that God says you can have a king, but the king's got to look at he's got to study the Torah, and then right, Gary? I forget where that was, but I remember
he's supposed to have a scroll like right next to him all the time and to read it.
Right, and always confer with it. It's almost like he's like the judge and the ruler,
right.
And then they'll have a prophet that also helps him, and that's what Samuel's doing here. Samuel's the prophet, so this is the first king, which is kind of weird. I mean, we didn't really talk. I mean, it doesn't really say how Saul got picked as king, but it wasn't a very good way because the Israelites just wanted a king because everyone else had a king, and that's what God gets mad at. But anyway, but
that's human being. Oh, everybody else has that. We want that.
Yeah, we want that. Right, we want a king. And then the other thing is, as we're reading this, this is a very nice passage, just as Ruth you said, and However, right as Saul starts, he has this adversary who's David, and David
Yeah.
is very young and very successful at what he does. He kills Goliath, and he does all these other things. And so, instead of Saul being a pal of David, and he sort of is, it's just turmoil. It's absolute turmoil. So, as I was saying, like, I was kind of pointing out, like, when they say, they lived in safety, there are periods of time when Israel does live in safety, but we don't hear much about what happens because it's not as dramatic.
Well, it's not, and that's right. It isn't really interesting to the reader.
That's right. And and so it's
Right.
good. It's wholesome. So we have to remember, like, those periods that are like, great. Okay, there was great times, but now we're going to learn about death and destruction as usual. Anyway.
Michael, what period of time is this?
So this is so I always look at David as in between, kind of the midpoint. This is kind of coming from a Christian perspective, though. So it's kind of in between Jesus and Moses. So it's like right in the center, I believe, something like that.
So
Would
is
you
it,
say
is
that?
it about 1500 BCE?
I don't really know. I would hate to put a time on it. But I mean, they've been in Israel for a while, and they've gone through a period of judges when no one really. This is all the books that I know of coming into 1 Samuel. So 1 Samuel starts to talk about the kings of Israel. So
My husband was really good with gematria, and he would know all of this.
yeah,
He would know all the dates and everything
yeah.
because he studied Talmud and everything. But I don't know. But I know that he knew that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably do a quick Google search, but
Yeah, right.
it would be
How is that important to you, Monique? I'm just curious.
Oh, because I like history. I like dates. I like to know when
Oh,
things happen.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes, it's important to me. It puts it in
That's
context.
good. That's good. Yeah.
I always think like that too.
It's funny.
I
In
always
the
like to know
opposite,
when
I'm the
things
opposite.
happen.
When I took history, I hated that I had to learn all the dates, and I wanted to know more about the history. And I felt that it's interesting. That was just me. When I was in high school, I didn't do well in history because maybe I had bad history teachers, but all I remember is having to remember dates. And now when I study history, it comes alive to me because I'm starting to know about the stories more than the dates. That's
Right,
just me,
right.
but everybody's different. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I
That's
think it's like
interesting.
500 BC, maybe 550 BC. It's hard to really place it, but anyway, it's a good question.
All righty.
All right,
But
now
it's a
going
good
back.
connection to Korach though, because how they were like the rebellion against like Moses. Like when they talk about the king, it's like Moses was the leader, but he was working like directly from God. That's the way the king has to be.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. If the king isn't like that, then then it's a problem.
That's a really good point. I mean, yeah, in many ways, Moses probably was the first king,
And
technically.
there it is, right there. You got the line. That's what it sums up right there. That's the important thing.
That's something I
fell on
highlighted
his
that
face.
probably last year. Yeah, that's funny.
Yep. He fell on his face.
Okay, I looked it up. It's 8th century BC.
8th century, so that would be
Yeah, you're
900.
only off by a few hundred years. In biblical
That wasn't
terms,
too
that's like
bad.
a couple of weeks. That's not bad.
All right.
So it's about 900. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that seems about right.
Dr. Ed, are you on securely now?
Yes, I couldn't get on.
Ah.
I had a
Yeah,
lot
we
of problems.
noticed you were struggling, right?
Yeah, I
Worried.
couldn't get
We
on.
lost you.
Finally,
you're here.
you finally
are
let
here.
me go. Thank you.
Does anyone want to start the Torah tonight? Thank
I'll
you, Ruth.
start.
Okay,
Good.
thank
That
you,
would be
Monique.
great. I'm a little tired. That's good.
Okay. Now Korah, son of Izhar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, betook himself along with Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, son of Pelech, descendants of Reuben, to rise up against Moses, together with 250 representatives of the Israelites, chieftains of the community, chosen in the assembly with fine reputations. They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far. For all the community are holy, all of them, and the Eternal is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above the Eternal's congregation? When Moses heard this, he fell on his face. Then he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, Come morning, the Eternal will make known who is God and who is holy, and will grant direct access. The one whom God has chosen will be granted access. Do this. You, Korah, and all your band, take fire pans, and tomorrow put fire in them and lay incense on them before the Eternal. Then the candidate whom the Eternal chooses, he shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. Moses said further to Korah, Hear me, sons of Levi. Is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has set you apart from the community of Israel and given you direct access to perform the duties of the Eternal's tabernacle and to minister to the community and serve them? Now that God has advanced you and all your fellow Levites with you, do you seek the priesthood too? Truly it is against the Eternal that you and all your company have banded together. For who is Aaron that you should rail against him? Moses sent for Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, but they said, We will not come. Is it not enough that you have brought us from a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness, that you would also lord it over us? Even if you had brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey and given us possession of fields and vineyards, should you gouge out those subordinates' eyes? We will not come. Moses was much aggrieved, and he said to the Eternal, Pay no regard to their oblation. I have not taken the ass of any of them, nor have I wronged any one of them. And Moses said to Korah, Tomorrow you and all your company appear before the Eternal, you and they, and you take your fire pan and lay incense on it, and each of you bring that fire pan before the Eternal, 250 fire pans. You and Aaron also bring your fire pans. They each took their fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and took a place at the entrance of the tent of meetings, as did Moses and Aaron. Korah gathered the whole community against him at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then the presence of the Eternal appeared to the whole community, and the Eternal One spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Send back from this community that I may annihilate them in an instant. But they fell on their faces and said, O God, source of the breath of all flesh, when one member sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community? The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the community and say, Withdraw from about the abodes of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, the elders of Israel following him. He addressed the community, saying, Move away from the tents of these wicked fellows and touch nothing that belongs to them, lest you be wiped out for all their sins. So they withdrew from about the abodes of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Now Dathan and Abiram had come out, and they stood at the entrance of their tents with their wives, their children, and their little ones. And Moses said, By this you shall know that it was the Eternal who sent me to do all these things, that they are not of my own devising. If these people's death is that of all humankind, if their lot is humankind's common fate, it was not the Eternal who sent me. But if the Eternal brings about something unheard of, so the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they shall go down alive into Sheol, you shall know that these fellows have spurned the Eternal. Scarcely had he finished speaking all these words, when the ground under them burst asunder, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, all Korah's people and all their possessions. They went down alive into Sheol with all that belonged to them. The earth closed over them, and they vanished from the midst. All Israel around them fled at their shrieks, for they said the earth might swallow us. And a fire went forth from the Eternal and consumed the 250 representatives offering the incense.
Boy, I never forget this parsha. It always affects me every time I read this parsha.
Oh, it makes me feel so good inside. Oh,
Boy,
feeling good.
I always think I'd be one of those people swallowed up. That's why.
No way.
I think I'm with you, Ruth. Somehow I might have done something wrong. But now this is kind of a civil war, right? Because isn't aren't Aaron and Moses both from Levi's house?
Yep.
So it's almost like the Levites are having a little fight match here.
Well, that's it. It's like an uprising,
Wow,
you
Yeah.
know.
amazing! I didn't notice.
But my thing is where you just had, I always think of the theme of the idea of Moses falling on his face, like he heard this person talk about, this rebelling against him. Why do you. And instead of just saying, hey, look, Schmendrick, I'm here because God put me here. I didn't ask for this. But, he falls on his face. He doesn't respond immediately. He falls on his face. And then when he gets up and he's like, he just starts asking, well, why aren't you happy or aren't you satisfied being in charge of, like, he doesn't, because the fact is that when he had to consider, he had to at least evaluate and consider what Korach was saying. Maybe there was truth to it, because you never know. Because a message from God can come from anybody. It doesn't matter who the messenger is, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
And that's, it shows that Moses, you have to listen to what everyone has to say. Korach was obviously, as it turned out, everything Moses told him was true. And God said, yeah, they are bad. I'm going to swallow them up.
Mm-hmm.
But Moses didn't immediately respond like that. He didn't do anything, and a lot of times we're like that even with people. Like, you'd be in the middle of an argument with somebody and say, we got to talk about this now. When in fact, it's like the worst time. You need time to evaluate and to consider and to think
And process,
before
right.
before you just immediately respond. And that's what I like about Moses' first response was that he fell down on his face. He humbled himself and he didn't respond immediately. That's always like the biggest thing that I get out of Korah.
Yeah. And in this year, for some reason, I could really visualize what was going on here, especially when Dathan and the other guy they said, we're not going to go up. We're not going to go to you. And so I could picture Moses going to them and how angry and how but still reserved, still very, resolute. And I was like, wow, that's such a drama. It's just
And
amazing.
Moses basically said, God will, he didn't argue, he just said, tomorrow morning God will, if everything I'm saying is true,
Exactly.
and,
It's yeah.
that's incredible. I always think of that.
It is amazing. It's an amazing story.
Thinking and processing before you open your mouth and just shoot off whatever you say, because you can't take it back. And it usually is going to be irrational in the heat of the moment. So you need
Right.
to process.
You're right. You can never go back once you say something.
Right.
It's out there. It's out
Yep.
there. Beautiful. You want to continue, Monique?
Sure. The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, order Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, to remove the fire pans that had become sacred from among the charred remains and scatter the coals abroad. Remove the fire pans of those who have sinned at the cost of their lives, and let them be made into hammered sheets as plating for the altar. But once they have been used for offering to the Eternal, they have become sacred. And let them serve as a warning to the people of Israel. Eleazar the priest took the copper fire pans, which had been used for offering by those who died in the fire. They were hammered into plating for the altar, as the Eternal had ordered him through Moses. It was to be a reminder to the Israelites so that no outsider, one not of Aaron's offspring, should presume to offer incense before the Eternal and suffer the fate of Korah and his band. Next day, the whole Israelite community railed against Moses and Aaron, saying, you too have brought death upon the Eternal's people. But as the community gathered against them, Moses and Aaron turned towards the tent of meeting. The cloud had covered it, and the presence of the Eternal appeared. Moses and Aaron reached the tent of meeting. The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, remove yourselves from this community, that I may annihilate them in an instant. They fell on their faces. Then Moses said to Aaron, take the fire pan and put on it fire from the altar. Add incense and take it quickly to the community and make expiation for them. For wrath has gone forth from the Eternal, the plague has begun.
Oof.
Again, they fell on their faces.
Aaron took it as Moses had ordered and ran to the midst of the congregation where the plague had begun amongst the people. He put on the incense and made expiation for the people. He stood between the dead and the living until the plague was checked. Those who died of the plague came to 14,700, aside from those who died on account of Korah. Aaron then returned to Moses at the entrance of the tent of meeting, since the plague was checked. The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and take from them, from the chieftains of their ancestral houses, one staff for each chieftain of an ancestral house, 12 staffs in all. Inscribe each one's name on his staff. There being one staff for each head of an ancestral house, also inscribe Aaron's name on the staff of Levi. Deposit them in the tent of meeting before the pact where I meet with you. The staff of the candidate whom I choose shall sprout, and I will rid myself of the incessant mutterings of the Israelites against you." Moses thus spoke to the Israelites. Their chieftains gave him a staff for each chieftain of an ancestral house, 12 staffs in all. Among these staffs was that of Aaron. Moses deposited the staffs before the Eternal in the tent of the pact. The next day Moses entered the tent of the pact, and there the staff of Aaron of the house of Levi had sprouted. It has brought forth sprouts, produced blossoms, and borne almonds. Moses then brought out all the staffs from before the Eternal to all the Israelites. Each identified and recovered his staff. The Eternal One said to Moses, "Put Aaron's staff back before the pact to be kept as a lesson to rebels, so that their mutterings against me may cease lest they die." This Moses did, just as the Eternal had commanded him, so he did. But the Israelites said to Moses, "Lo, we shall perish. We are lost, all of us lost. Everyone who has so much ventures near the Eternal's tabernacle must die. Alas, we are doomed to perish." The Eternal One said to Aaron, "You and your sons and the ancestral house under your charge shall bear any guilt connected with the sanctuary. You and your sons alone shall bear any guilt connected with the priesthood. You shall also associate yourself, your kinsmen, to the tribe of Levi, your ancestral tribe, to be attached to you and to minister to you while you and your sons under your charge are before the tent of the pact. They shall discharge their duties to you and to the tent as a whole, for they must not have any contact with the furnishings of the shrine or with the altar, lest both they and you die. They shall be attached to you and discharge the duties of the tent of meeting, all the service of the tent, but no one outsider shall intrude upon you as you discharge the duties connected with the shrine and the altar, and that wrath may not again strike the Israelites." I'm going to pass.
Okay. So this is really something too. We get this whole like initiation of, or a installing Aaron again as the priest, right? It's kind of an amazing,
Like reiterating, like
yeah, for the second time. Like this is the one, right? Interesting. Who would like to read? Dr.
I can
will.
read. Where do you
Oh,
want?
okay, you can.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I read last week.
Oh, okay. I hereby take your fellow Levites from among the Israelites. They are assigned to you in dedication to the Eternal to do the work of the tent of meeting, while you and your sons shall be careful to perform your priestly duties in everything pertaining to the altar and to what is behind the curtain. I make your priesthood a service of dedication. Any outsider who encroaches shall be put to death. The Eternal One spoke further to Aaron. I hereby give you charge of my gifts, all the sacred donations of the Israelites. I grant them to you and to your sons as a prerequisite, a due for all time. This shall be yours from the most holy sacrifices, the offerings by fire. Every such offering that they render to me as most holy sacrifices, namely every meal offering, purgation offering, and reparation offering of theirs, shall belong to you and your sons. You shall partake of them as most sacred donations. Only males may eat them. You shall treat them as consecrated. This too shall be yours, the gift offerings of their contributions, all the elevation offerings of the Israelites. I give to you and your wives, to your sons and to the daughters that are with you, as a due for all time. Every one of your household who is pure may eat it. All of the best of the new oil, wine, and grain, the choice parts that they present to the Eternal, I give to you. The first fruits of everything in their land that they bring to the Eternal shall be yours. Every one of your household who is pure may eat them. Everything that has been prescribed in Israel shall be yours. The first male issue of the womb of every being, human or beast, that is offered to the Eternal shall be yours. But you shall have the male firstborn of human beings redeemed, and you shall also have the firstling of impure animals redeemed. Take as their redemption price, from the age of 1 month up, the money equivalent of 5 shekels by the sanctuary weight, which is 20 gerahs. But the firstlings of cattle, sheep, or goats may not be redeemed. They are consecrated. You shall dash their blood against the altar and turn their fat into smoke as an offering by fire for a pleasing odor to the Eternal. But their meat shall be yours. It shall be yours like the breast of elevation offering and like the right thigh. All the sacred gifts that the Israelites set aside for the Eternal I give to you, to your sons, and to the daughters that are with you, a due for all time. It shall be an everlasting covenant of salt before the Eternal, for you and your offspring as well. And the Eternal said to Aaron, You shall, however, have no territorial share among them, or own any portion in their midst. I am your portion and your share among the Israelites. And to the Levites I hereby give all the tithes in Israel, as their share in return for the services that they perform, the services of the tent of meeting. Henceforth Israelites shall not trespass on the tent of meeting, and thus incur guilt and die. Only Levites shall perform the services of the tent of meeting. Others would incur guilt. It is the law for all time throughout the ages. But they shall have no territorial share among the Israelites, for it is the tithes set aside by the Israelites as a gift to the Eternal that I give to the Levites as their share. Therefore I have said concerning them, they shall have no territorial share among the Israelites. The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Levites and say to them, When you receive from the Israelites their tithes, which I have assigned to you as your share, you shall set aside from them 1/10 of the tithe as a gift to the Eternal. This shall be accounted to you as your gift. As with the new grain from the threshing floor or the flow from the vat, so shall you on your part set aside a gift for the Eternal from all the tithes that you receive from the Israelites, and from them you shall bring the gift for the Eternal to Aaron the priest. You shall set aside all gifts due to the Eternal from everything that is donated to you, from each thing its best portion, the part thereof that is to be consecrated. Say to them further, When you have removed the best part from it, your Levites may consider it the same as the yield of threshing floor or vat. You and your households may eat it anywhere, for it is your recompense for your services in the tent of meeting. You will incur no guilt through it once you have removed the best part from it, but you must not profane the sacred donations of the Israelites, lest you die. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I like that.
You're like a villain.
Oh, fire and brimstone, baby. Fire and brimstone. Yeah. Absolute. Cause and effect. If you do this, this happens. That's it. Yep. Now the choice is yours. You do whatever you choose to do.
Have you ever done anything that you say, well, yeah, I did something that had a cause and effect?
Everything does. Everything that
No,
you
but
do
no,
has
I'm saying, I find that there's so many times in my life I've done something that, is wrong.
Everything that you do has an effect, whether you see it now or whether you ever see it in your
Well,
lifetime.
that's what I'm saying. That's why I said I would have been swallowed up.
And not
because-
only everything that you do, but it is equally everything that you don't do.
Right. But what I'm saying is that the reason why I said I would have been swallowed up because I would have rebelled. That's why.
Well,
Yeah, that's part of it. I
I'm
think.
being honest. I don't think that I'm so ethical in some ways because I rebel and I do things that sometimes are not always appropriate, so I don't think of myself as some true blue ethical person every minute, I don't think I'm a bad
who
person.
is? I mean, we try. Some, we.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, sometimes
We
I've done things
aspire.
that I know were wrong, it's not like I didn't know they were wrong, so I don't know. It's kind of, I don't like this fire and brimstone because it scares me.
That's the
Because I'm
idea.
a human being and I make mistakes,
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're all there. We're all in the same boat, right? I think that I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to judge anyone, and I think a lot of times we even maybe judge ourselves even harsher than we sometimes judge others, if
Right.
But
some
whatever you
people-
do, though, God gives you the commandments, but you also have teshuvah, and you do have the ability. God knows that you're going to bleep up, and if you bleep up, as long as you return, that's
That's what Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah is about, right?
Right.
yeah.
Right.
I don't think God expects us to be perfect. It's just that you deal with you screw ups a certain way. That you reflect on them and that you try to repent for them. There again, that's Yom Kippur. But that doesn't happen just once a year. That can happen every day of your life
Right.
if you wanted to.
Dr. Ed, what do you think? The light goes on.
I don't know. I mean, there is a theme that runs completely through the Torah, and the theme is very simple. It is the only written law at the time, and it's read every single week. And every single week, it may be read to a different audience, and the audience has to be reminded that lest you will die if you do those things you have to do. So, to that end, I'm very practical in saying that you may listen to the reading of the Torah once every year, and you better be reminded at that time you follow the 10 Commandments, or lest you will die. And that's what it's all about. When was the Torah written? Think of it. When was the Torah written? 5,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago when barely anybody was literate. Very few people. All these people that they're being spoken to weren't literate. The whole world wasn't literate. Maybe 1% of the world had some understanding of writing and reading and writing, and those people who could read and write had to tell the story and set the standard for those people who didn't. So that's why it's fire and brimstone every single week, is because everybody had to hear it at least once.
And you think of how long it would take too, because no, I mean, there's no radio, television, printing presses.
But,
You don't even know how
in
many.
that way, I think they were using their minds more sharply than we are today.
Oh,
I
come
think.
on.
Oh yeah, in
Come
some ways.
on. They were morons. They were
No, I'm
functional
not.
morons.
No. Okay. I'm talking about the people that were studying, like Maimonides and people like that.
Well, that's 400 years ago, Maimonides. We're talking about 5,000 years ago.
Or 4,000 more.
5,000.
What's 1,000 between friends?
What's 1,000 between 10? I mean, you're absolutely right about Maimonides. That's
He did
reason.
so much. He did so much. He not only was a scholar. I mean, he was a doctor. He was seeing patients. He didn't waste a lot of time like we do today. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, but
He was. If you really study Maimonides, he was brilliant. Not just brilliant for the Torah. He was brilliant in so many ways. Very, very talented man.
No question. For his time.
Right.
Yes, for his time.
But that's the other thing that I have to say about this whole period that we're talking about. The Israelites were going against the grain, in major league against the grain. They're trying to follow this concept of God where everyone else has these
Idols
little idols and things that they can hold in their hand. No, you can't have an idol that you can hold in your hand. You have to go to the king of the universe. Even the concept of the universe. How do we even conceive of that 4,000, 5,000 years ago?
Interesting.
I mean, it's amazing that they even decided to follow this God. And, and they came up. Yeah, of course they fell down. They failed. They didn't. But they wrote it all down. That's the thing. That's the most incredible thing about the entire Bible is they wrote all the bad stuff in it. They kept it all there. I mean, and they, if you think about the history of the United States and how we talk about the history of the United States, we wipe out all the bad stuff. We don't even talk about it. We don't want to talk about Vietnam. We don't want to talk about,
They don't want to talk about the
9/11.
Native Americans and how we really butchered them. I agree.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't, and now because people do want to say no, we should talk about the problems that we have with slavery. Oh no, we're a perfect nation. Come on, let's be real. That's what Torah is about. That's the Bible. It's about being real. It's about being honest. It's about being, like this is where we fell down, and then that's how we learn. Like people write the bad stuff down, and then we learn not to do that.
The Torah represents how we're supposed to be, Tamim.
Listen, before we all leave, I started out when not all of you were here that next week is July 4th, and I will not be here.